There's a lie we've been sold about what it means to be a good person. We're told that compassion means endless tolerance, that empathy requires us to absorb everyone's pain, that strength and kindness are opposites. We're taught to be soft, open, endlessly forgiving. And then we wonder why we're exhausted, why we're surrounded by people who take and never give, why our goodness seems to attract predators rather than repel them. The uncomfortable truth is this: compassion without boundaries isn't virtue. It's self-destruction disguised as morality. Carl Jung spent decades exploring the human psyche, mapping the territories of consciousness that most people are too afraid to enter. And what he discovered will disturb you. He found that beneath every person's carefully constructed identity, their ego, their persona, there exists a shadow. This shadow contains everything you've denied about yourself. Your capacity for cruelty, for selfishness, for manipulation. Most people spend their entire lives running from this shadow, pretending it doesn't exist, projecting it onto others. And in doing so, they become weak. They become victims of their own denied nature. Machiavelli understood something similar from a different angle. He wrote The Prince not as a guide to evil but as a manual for survival in a world where good intentions without power are meaningless. He saw that leaders who tried to be purely good, purely moral, purely compassionate ended up destroyed by those who weren't constrained by such ideals. And so he advocated for what I'm calling ruthless compassion, the ability to care deeply while acting strategically, to love humanity while understanding its darkness, to be kind without being naive. Before we go deeper into this synthesis of Jung's psychological depth and Machiavelli's strategic wisdom, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to stop performing goodness and start embodying power that's rooted in genuine understanding. Hit that notification bell because what we explore here isn't comfortable. It's not designed to make you feel better about yourself. It's designed to wake you up to the full spectrum of what you're capable of, both light and shadow, and teach you how to use that awareness to navigate a world that will exploit your unconscious goodness. Now let's begin. Jung wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." What does this mean practically? It means that the person who claims to have no darkness, no selfish impulses, no capacity for manipulation, that person is the most dangerous. Not because they're lying to you, but because they're lying to themselves. Their shadow is operating unconsciously, sabotaging them and everyone around them, while they maintain this false image of purity. Think about the person who prides themselves on being nice, on never saying no, on always being available. On the surface, they seem like the ideal friend, partner, or coworker. But watch what happens over time. They build resentment. They passive-aggressively punish people for taking advantage of them, even though they never set boundaries. They martyr themselves and then guilt others for not appreciating their sacrifice. This is the shadow at work. The denied selfishness, the repressed anger, the unacknowledged need for power, all of it seeping out in toxic ways because it was never integrated consciously. Ruthless compassion starts with this recognition. You have a shadow. You have the capacity for cruelty, for selfishness, for manipulation. And rather than running from this truth, you embrace it. Not to act on those impulses unconsciously, but to integrate them consciously. Jung called this process individuation. It's the journey of becoming whole by acknowledging all parts of yourself, not just the parts that society approves of. And when you do this, something extraordinary happens. You stop being manipulable, because you understand the darkness in others, because you've met it in yourself. Machiavelli wrote, "It is necessary for a prince to know how to use both the beast and the man." He wasn't advocating mindless cruelty. He was recognizing that human nature contains both rational capacity and animal instinct, both noble aspiration and base survival drive. And the leader, the person who wants to be effective in the world, must be able to access both. This is what I mean by the mask. Machiavelli understood that we all wear masks, personas that we present to the world. But most people don't choose their mask consciously. They let society, family, and fear choose it for them. Jung's concept of the persona is nearly identical. He described it as the mask we wear to navigate social reality, the role we play to be accepted. But Jung warned that when you identify completely with your persona, when you think you are the mask, you lose touch with your authentic self. You become a hollow performance. The key is to wear the mask consciously, to know it's a mask, to choose when to wear it and when to remove it. This is strategic authenticity. You're not being fake. You're being adaptive without losing your core. Here's where ruthless compassion becomes practical. When you're dealing with someone who's suffering, your natural instinct, if you're a genuinely compassionate person, is to try to save them, to fix their problems, to take on their emotional burden. But Jung would ask, whose need are you really serving? Is your helping actually about them, or is it about your need to feel good, to feel needed, to avoid the discomfort of witnessing suffering without being able to fix it? This is shadow work, examining your motivations with brutal honesty. And Machiavelli would add another layer. Is your help actually helping, or are you enabling? Are you giving someone a hand up, or are you carrying them indefinitely? Ruthless compassion asks these hard questions. It doesn't help for the sake of feeling helpful. It helps strategically, in ways that actually empower the other person to solve their own problems. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is refuse to rescue someone. Let them face the consequences of their choices. Let them develop their own strength through struggle. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote something that bridges Jung and Machiavelli perfectly. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. If you truly care about someone, you don't shield them from all friction. You don't remove every obstacle. You help them develop the capacity to face friction themselves. This is ruthless compassion. It cares enough to let people struggle when struggle is what will make them stronger. It refuses to participate in the comfortable lie that we can eliminate all suffering. Instead, it helps people develop the tools to transform suffering into growth. Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself as you consider this. How many people in your life are taking advantage of your compassion? How many relationships are fundamentally unbalanced, where you give and they take, where you sacrifice and they benefit, where you're always the strong one, the helper, the savior? And how long have you told yourself that this is what compassion requires? Jung would say you're projecting your shadow onto them. You're playing the role of the selfless helper because you're afraid to acknowledge your own needs, your own capacity for selfishness. And they're playing the role of the helpless victim because they've found someone willing to enable it. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions." He wasn't celebrating this. He was warning you. The world is full of people who will exploit your goodness if you don't protect it with wisdom. And this is where the mask becomes essential. You need different faces for different situations. Not fake faces, strategic faces. With your trusted inner circle, you can remove the mask. You can be vulnerable, authentic, fully yourself. But with the world at large, with people who haven't earned that access, you need the protection of the persona. Jung described this perfectly when he wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But not every meeting should result in transformation. Not every person deserves access to your inner chemistry. Ruthless compassion knows how to be kind without being open, how to help without merging, how to care without taking responsibility for outcomes you can't control. This is the art we're exploring. Here's a practical example that synthesizes everything we've discussed so far. Someone in your life is constantly in crisis. Every week there's a new emergency, a new tragedy, a new reason they need your time, money, or emotional labor. The old model of compassion says you should always be there for them. Always answer the call, always help. But ruthless compassion asks different questions. Is your help actually improving their situation over time, or are you just managing the symptoms of their dysfunction? Are they taking responsibility for their patterns, or are they expecting you to be their permanent safety net? Jung would say, examine your shadow. Why do you keep helping? Is it because it makes you feel needed? Because you're afraid of being seen as cold if you set boundaries? Because their chaos distracts you from dealing with your own problems? These are uncomfortable questions, but they're essential. Because if you're helping for unconscious reasons, you're not actually being compassionate. You're using them to meet your own unexamined needs, and they're using you to avoid facing their own growth. Machiavelli would add, examine the outcome. If your help hasn't produced improvement over time, it's not help. It's enabling, and true compassion sometimes means withdrawing support so the person is forced to develop their own resources. This feels cruel. Your shadow will resist it because you've built an identity around being the helper. But this is where ruthless becomes necessary. You have to be willing to feel like the bad guy in service of someone else's growth. You have to be willing to let them struggle when struggle is what they need. The integration of Jung's shadow work and Machiavelli's strategic thinking creates something powerful. A person who can act with genuine compassion because they're not motivated by unconscious needs or naive idealism. They see clearly. They understand that the person begging for help might also be unconsciously manipulating. That the victim might also be a predator. That goodness without discernment is just another form of ignorance. And so they help wisely. They give strategically. They care deeply, but from a place of strength, not from a place of unconscious compulsion. Let's go even deeper into the shadow, because this is where most people get uncomfortable and turn away. Jung discovered that our shadow doesn't just contain negative traits. It also contains disowned power, unexpressed rage, forbidden desires. The person who never gets angry isn't enlightened. They're repressed, and that repressed anger will leak out sideways, in passive aggression, in self-sabotage, in depression. Ruthless compassion means acknowledging your capacity for anger, for saying no, for drawing lines in the sand that others cannot cross. This isn't cruelty, it's wholeness. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote about the necessity of being feared as well as loved. He didn't mean you should try to make people fear you. He meant that if you're incapable of inspiring any fear, if you're so soft and accommodating that people have no concern about crossing you, you will be walked over. Ruthless compassion knows how to access the beast when necessary. Not to attack, but to defend. To set boundaries that have real consequences. To say no and mean it so completely that people don't test you a second time. Here's what this looks like in practice. You've integrated your shadow. You know you're capable of cutting people off, of withdrawing love, of being ruthless when necessary. But you don't do these things impulsively or unconsciously. You do them strategically, after careful consideration, when compassion without consequences would only enable more harm. This is the mask Machiavelli talks about. You can be gentle, you can be kind, but underneath that gentleness, people sense steel. They sense that you're not gentle because you're weak. You're gentle because you're choosing to be, and that choice can be revoked. Jung wrote, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. When you've met your own shadow, when you've acknowledged your own capacity for manipulation, selfishness, and cruelty, you become almost impossible to manipulate. Because you recognize those tactics when others use them. You see the guilt trip for what it is. You see the victimhood performance. You see the strategic helplessness. And you don't judge it, because you understand that we all have these capacities. But you also don't fall for it. This is perhaps the most liberating aspect of ruthless compassion. You can care about someone while clearly seeing their shadow at work. You don't have to pretend they're purely a victim or purely innocent to feel compassion for them. You can hold both truths simultaneously. They're struggling and they're also manipulating. They're hurt and they're also hurting others. They need help and they're also avoiding responsibility. Ruthless compassion doesn't require you to pick one narrative. It can hold the complexity. And from that place of clear sight, you can make wise decisions about what kind of help, if any, will actually serve everyone's highest good. Machiavelli wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This is the synthesis we've been building toward. The fox is Jung's shadow work, the wisdom that comes from knowing your own darkness and recognizing it in others. The lion is Machiavelli's mask, the strength that comes from integrating power consciously and wielding it strategically. Ruthless compassion is both. It's the fox's wisdom and the lion's strength, operating together in service of genuine care that's protected by genuine boundaries. Let me bring this full circle. We started by challenging the lie that compassion means endless tolerance. We've explored Jung's shadow, the denied aspects of ourselves that operate unconsciously until we integrate them. We've examined Machiavelli's mask, the strategic use of persona to navigate a world that will exploit unconscious goodness. And we've synthesized these into ruthless compassion, the ability to care deeply while acting wisely, to help strategically rather than compulsively, to set boundaries that serve rather than harm. This isn't a comfortable path. It requires you to look at parts of yourself you've been taught to deny. Your capacity for selfishness, your need for power, your potential for cruelty. But when you meet these aspects with consciousness rather than denial, they transform from threats into tools. You become someone who can navigate the full spectrum of human experience, light and shadow, without being controlled by either extreme. You become whole, and from that wholeness, you can offer genuine compassion that's protected by genuine wisdom. If this resonates with you, if you're ready to stop performing goodness and start embodying power that serves genuine compassion, subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who's ready to do their shadow work. And remember, the path to ruthless compassion starts with one brave act of honesty. Admitting that you're capable of more darkness than you've allowed yourself to acknowledge, and that this admission is the beginning of true strength, not the end of your goodness. Thank you for walking this uncomfortable, necessary path with me.